learning. English. Piskatapa. It means a good note, a good kritel. Yeah, it's a Shana Rabba. And whoever needs it for Shlema, so for Shlema. Talk about Panacea. It should be a Panacea. Morning. Yeah.
Morning.
So we're going to start Tanur Rabbanan on about 26A. B'char Tam, Shenafal Labar. What did we have in the Mishnah? We had B'char Shenafal Labar. Yeah, a B'char falls into a pit. So what's our discussion over here is that we need a Chacham to go look at the B'char to see if it has, B'char is the firstborn animal. That's really a sacrifice. The Chacham has to look at it to see if there's a mum. So in the Mishnah, we said B'char Shenafal Labar. We actually explained it, that it was really a mum in the B'char, but it was a temporary mum. And after it fell into the bar, and then when you got it out, or the Chacham goes down to look at it, there was a mum kavua in it, a permanent mum. And now the question was, is that acceptable? That's a machlekes, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. But we ignored the issue of muktzah by saying that it had a mum beforehand. At least that's what we were trying to do. Okay, now b'char tam shenafal labar. This is going to have a real issue. This has the muktzah issue. So because if it's a tam, then you can't shecht it when bein hashmashas comes in. There was no mum. The tam means that there's no mum at all. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Omer Yered Mum Chaviyera. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, which is the author of the Mishnah, the editor of the Mishnah, he says that
it fell down before we knew the
there was no issue with this animal, which means it's still a sacrifice. Now, the only way we can accept this is by clarifying that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is not Rabbi Yehuda that we had before in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda is, as we know, is Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Loi. He argues with Rabbi Shimon. They're both students of Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Yehuda bar Rabbi Loi holds that there's an issue of muktzah. Rabbi Shimon holds there isn't an issue of muktzah. Comes along Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and says there's no issue of muktzah. He doesn't fit. Rabbi Yehuda argues with Rabbi Yehuda.
Does it matter if it's the first year? What if it's obligated when it's obligated?
Yeah, I don't think it ever goes out of.
So I think there's an obligation to sacrifice animal.
There's an obligation. It's what we're dealing with is that until there's a mum in it, it's considered a karban.
So this is an animal in its first year. You have that obligation.
Yeah.
Right.
But I don't think it even in the second year does it go out of until it has a mum, it doesn't go out of that status. So Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is Yerid Mum Chaviyera, that there's no issue of muktzah. A chacham can go down, a mumcha or a chacham can go and look into it and see if there's a mum. Im yesh by mum, if there is a mum, then yalav yeshchay. Then he can bring it up, shecht it, and eat it because it's yamtiv. The imlav, and if there is no mum, now here's a little bit of an issue. It says lo yeshchay. Now lo yeshchay, if there's no mum, and it's a b'char tam, it's not a chiddush at all. Of course, you can't shecht it. There's no mum, so it must mean la yala. That's how we're going to have to learn it. Means you can't bring it up and do some sort of harama that maybe we'll find a mum or something, and you can't even bring it up. So la yishchat wouldn't mean la yishchat because then it would be if there's no mum, then obviously there's Here Rashi goes through that there's possibly another girsa here, and it's not really b'char tam shenafal labar. it's really b'char shenafal labar, like we had in our Mishnah, and then we don't have to learn it like this, and then L'yishchik could really be L'yishchik. Okay. Amar Loi Reb Shimon ben Manasseh.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear what the
Yeah. A b'char is a firstborn animal. The b'char tam is a firstborn animal that doesn't have a mum, because we clearly know it doesn't have a mum.
One we don't
And a
know.
b'char would mean, well, could be there is a mum, but we didn't bring it to the kayin yet. Right? So the Mishnah was talking about, could be there was a mum, we didn't bring it to the kayin. Now we're learning a Tana Rabbanan, a Beitza, where it says clearly it's a b'char tam. The only thing is, there's another girsa that doesn't have the word tam in there, and then we could learn it the way we learned the Mishnah, and then whatever. Amalei Reb Shimon ben Manasseh. Reb Shimon ben Manasseh says to Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. Reb Shimon ben Manasseh was in Pirkei Avos, in Perek Vav. Elu sheva midei shemanu chachamim b'talmidim kulam neskayim b'Rebbe b'vanav. That's Reb Shimon ben Manasseh. He speaks about the Rebbe and his sons. He was in the days of Rebbe. It says, Hariyamru, the sages have said, Ein Rayan Mumim b'Yamtiv. You're not allowed to look at a b'char, you're not allowed to examine a b'char on Yamtiv. Now, who are those sages? Reb Shimon bar Yochai. Reb Shimon, on the top of the page, second line. He says, Kol shein mumei nikam b'yayim enter min hamuchan. You can't look at it on Yamtiv. We explained why. Possibly it's misakin, it's fixing the animal. Possibly it's done din. You're not supposed to do court cases, and the judgment of the mumcha is considered like he's done. He's judging a case. Okay, Ketzad, how is this? How does this work? Noilad by mum meyarav yamtiv. If there is if there was a mum in it before Yamtiv, Ein mevakar noiseh b'Yamtiv. You're not allowed to examine it on Yamtiv. Now, the term Ein mevakar noiseh means l'chatchila you're not supposed to examine it. Now, it doesn't say this, but it's implied that what happens if you did examine it, then it would be considered examined, and it's you could check it. Ein mevakar noiseh is din l'chatchila. Why? The mum was there before Yamtiv. On Yamtiv, you're not supposed to examine it. But when you do examine it, it's acceptable. Right. Nailed by mum be Yamtiv. If there was a mum, the mum came only on Yamtiv, then what happened when Yamtiv came in? There was no mum there. So ein zeh min hamuchan, this is not considered prepared. And even if you do examine it, it doesn't help. Why? Because now you're totally fixing it. You're really masaking it by making a psak here. Because when Yamtiv came in, it didn't even have a mum. B'shavin. However, everyone agrees, which is Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Shimon, they'll both agree that what happens if the animal is born with a mum, missing a leg or something, has a real mum? So it was never not fit. Right when it was born, it was already eligible to be shechted.
Which time frame here after
Yeah.
So the animal having a mum is a good thing.
Right.
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 Right. So this is positive. So you might want to go down. You want to go down and examine it. If the bony wants to check it.
Right.
Positive, not negative.
Yeah, let me clarify. Let's tell the Dr. Sam that the mum is a positive thing. Because if there's a mum, if there's a blemish in it, then it becomes something that's eligible for the kayin to shecht and eat as his own property, his own item. If there is no mum, then it would be a sacrifice and it can't be shechted. So basically, every bachar nowadays, we have to wait for a mum. What do the farmers do? they do a Mechiras Chametz, like Mechiras Chametz. You sell the mother to a non-Jew, so that when it's born, it's not chayav. And then they buy it back afterwards. The guy doesn't want to sell it back. No, they sell the mother. They sell the mother and wait for it to have the child. Oh, so then that's it. That's it. Then they take everything back. If it would be, the only thing is what's a bachar? Bachar is only a male. Yeah. So bachar would be, if it would be a male offspring. So then they saved it. Yeah, then they buy it. But they want the mother back anyway. Okay. Yeah, the Gemara talks about that the danger of giving birth is in the first child, the first offspring. So then after that, then there's no danger of lessons.
So the first one goes.
No, so and that's one of the reasons why you don't trust a non-Jew when he's selling you an animal. You can ask him, did this animal have a child yet? So then, if he says yes, and then the next, offspring is going to be not a bachar, you don't trust him, because what he really just did was he was really telling you that don't worry, it survived the childbirth, so it's already you don't have any risk here. So he's increasing the price. You can't trust him to say that already. Okay. Darash, let's just clarify. One more time. A mum before Yom Tov, l'chatchila, you're not allowed to examine it, but if you did, it's acceptable. If it was on Yom Tov, the mum came, then you're not allowed to examine it, and even if you do examine it, it's not acceptable. But however, everyone would agree that if it was born with a mum, that you can even go ahead and examine it. Okay. Even l'chatchila. Darash Rabba Baravuna. We had.
If it was born before you have to, and it's still in the pit.
Yeah.
And they would go check what it's technically,
Why? Oh, in the last case. Oh, in the last case. If it was born with the mum. So why do you have to examine it? Well, all it means is that yeah, it turns out that the Chacham has to make a pronouncement also. I think even if it's obvious. I think. You see the mum, but the Chacham has to examine it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Oh, the problem with being fine and developing a mum is that something in this animal is being now prepared on Yom Tov when before Yom Tov it wasn't, which would put it under possibly the category of muktzah, or the pronouncement of the Chacham is fixing it. Right. So Rabbi Baravuna taught the following. We had Rabbi Baravuna yesterday. He taught that you're allowed to go examine it l'chatchila if it was born with a mum. Amalei Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Abatani, my father taught. I don't know who Rav Nachman's father is. Rav Yaakov, I think his name was. Because we usually don't say that Rav Nachman is Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak was later. He was in the days of Rava. This is Rav Nachman bar Yaakov. Rav Nachman, and the student of Rav from yesterday. Yeah, when you say Rav Nachman, everyone thinks Rav Nachman of Breslau. It's not. no relation. Maybe there is, but not by in the Gemara. Okay, so Rav Nachman says, Abba Tani im avaru bikri mevukar. Only if you went ahead and examined it is it considered examined, but l'chatchila not. If And you say you're allowed to go ahead and examine it. It was born with the mum. So it turns out that Rav Nachman doesn't agree with the statement of Rabba bar Rav Huna. Amar Abaya says, Kavasei de Rabba bar Rav Huna mistabra. Rabba bar Rav Huna is probably right. It looks like he's correct. Midiktani plus abavi, because it says it in 3 clauses. Take a look. Neilad by mum me'erev yamtiv. That's clause 1. If it was a mum came into it before yamtiv, so ein mevaker needs to be yamtiv. It says you don't examine it on yamtiv. Now that term ein mevaker, and we explained lechatchila hu delay. Only lechatchila you don't examine. But if you did examine it, shaperdam. Okay, that's all of clause 1, which is lechatchila not b'diavad yes. Noiled by mum be yamtiv, clause 2. If the mum came on yamtiv, Reb Shimon Reb Shimon says you can't examine it, but he doesn't say that. He says it's not prepared, which means that even if you do examine it, it's not acceptable. That's clause 2. That even b'diavad it's not. Now, if I had a clause 1 which said l'chatchila not b'diavad yes, clause 2 is even b'diavad not. So what are you going to have in clause 3? It can't be one of those 2 categories. It must be that even l'chatchila. I need one more category here. That you can examine it. If it would have been a l'chatchila the way Rav Nachman wants it, that l'chatchila not, but b'diavad yes, then why didn't you just put it in the first category, which that was the halach in the first category, in the first clause? So, yeah, the third and the first should be the same if the halacha is the same. Noilad by mum be'erev yamtiv, or noilad hu mumayimai is all erev yamtiv. Oh well, it doesn't have to be erev yamtiv. Even if it's noilad hu mumayimai on yamtiv, it should be also acceptable because the din would have been the same. So, yeah. So it must be Abaya saying that even l'chatchila you're allowed to examine it. Gemara says 1 second. But Yasser Rabbi when Rabbi came, Rabbi I think was an editor of the Brises. Also, Vaisi Masnisa Biada. He came and he brought the Brisa with him. Where did he come to? Where is he coming? Does it say he's coming to Bavel? If you have any commentary there, Rabbi I don't know the history of Rabbi
From Eretz Israel to Babylon.
Oh, really? So he brought this brisa. He said, "Bein shenelad by mum me'erev yamtiv," whether the mum was from before yamtiv. Bein shenelad by mum be yamtiv, whether it was on yamtiv. Chachamim ma'imrem ein ze min hamuchan. Chachamim say it's not prepared. How does this prove to us? Which means like this. You see, what Rabbi Shia did with this brisa, what this brisa is telling us, is that Noilad by mum me erev yamtiv and Noilad by mum be yamtiv has the same din. Both of them are ein zeh min hamuchan. Both of them are even b'diavad, not acceptable, even if it's nailed by mum me'erev yamtiv. So if that's the case, so what would be nailed hu umumay? It would be one step removed, which would be like Rav Nachman says at lechatchila no, but b'diavad yes. So it turns out that according to this brisa, nailed hu umumay, if it's born together with the mum, so it's l'chatchila, you're not allowed to examine it. But if you did, then it would be acceptable. So, okay, so you brought a brisa from Rabbi Shia. The problem is that we have a brisa Tana Rabbanan that says that it's in 2 categories, which makes it a 3rd category. So, which means that even l'chatchila it's allowed. says Hahi Ada Bar Uchmihu de Mishabish Vitani. Get a little like Lashon Hara over here. This was taught by Ada Bar Uchmi, a couple of years, that we know that he had Mishnayos that that weren't accurate. He would, he would forget, and they would get corrupted. Usually, a Tanur Rabbana, at least what we understood from Igeris Reb Shiragain, at least, and now it's translated in the Art Scroll introduction to the Talmud. That letter that Reb Shiragain wrote to the people from Kirwan, asking about the Gemara. So he says over there that a Tanur Rabbanan is a very special brisa. It was edited by Reb Chia and Reb Beitza. So here we had a Tanur Rabbanan. The Gemara tells us that it wasn't edited by Reb Chia or by Reb Beitza. Clearly not by Reb Beitza. It was set over by Ada Bar Uchmi. And he wasn't accurate. Yeah. Now Uchmi sounds like dark. Yeah, it sounds like that. Okay. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak comes in. Masnitin Nami Dayaka. If you look at our Mishnah, it will also seem to prove Rabbi Shia's brisa. Diktani, because over there the Mishnah says Reb Shimon Aimer, Kol she'ein mumay nikar me'erev yamtiv, ein ze min hamuchan. Yeah, we weren't medayak this yesterday when we were learning. Reb Shimon Aimer, Kol she'ein mumay nikar me'bayid yaim, it says ein ze min hamuchan. My ein mumay nikar. What does it mean, ein mumay nikar? That its mum is not recognizable. Ilema she'ein mumay nikar klal. If you want to say that it doesn't have a mum at all,
Because you can't notice it.
right? Nikar means you can't notice it. So pshita, then it's obvious. Shrichel meimar. You have to tell me that it's muktzah. Now, Reb Shimon doesn't hold of muktzah, but Reb Shimon is arguing with Reb Yehuda, who does hold of muktzah. So Reb Shimon wouldn't have to tell Reb Yehuda, Kol shein mumei nikar, that you can't examine it, because Reb Yehuda holds that it's usher also. So it must be Ela Deleis Chasi L'Chacham Erev Yamtiv Imam Kavua Imam Maiver. It means that the mum was there, but it wasn't shown to the Chacham yet. Because the Chacham is going to determine if it's a temporary mum or if it's a permanent mum. Katani Miyas, whatever the case is, Ein Ze Min Hamuchan. We see that even b'di'evet it's not good, even though it had a mum from Erev Yamtiv. Aha. You see, Kol shein mum nikar means that it had a mum, but it just wasn't shown to the Chacham. So, and what are we saying? Ein Ze Min Hamuchan, which means b'di'evet it's not good. Which means that the brisa that we quoted that says that if it had a mum before, it's only l'chatchila, not you're not supposed to see it, not b'di'evet, is different than the Mishnah. So the Mishnah would fit better with Rabbi Shia, that says that a mum before Yom Tov and a mum on Yom Tov, both of them is b'di'evet not acceptable. And then what would imply, Shema Mina, what that would imply was that if it's noilad hu mumayimai, that it would only be acceptable b'di'evet, but not l'chatchila. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
this might be a silly question, but if this person is an expert, he doesn't know he's not supposed to judge on Yom Tov?
He says, Daniel's asking that if the person's an expert, shouldn't he know that he shouldn't be judging on Yom Tov? How was there b'di'evet?
He's an expert on what.
Yeah. 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 Rabbi Naftali says he's an expert on what's a mum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they said that a Shaila and Kaparis in Los Angeles, they didn't know something that shaykh them, but they didn't know. So they said take it to Mrs. Reichik. It was an older woman. That she knew the inside of a chicken, she knew that. So anyway, doesn't mean that every Shaila goes to Mrs. Reichik. It means Okay. Okay. But we have a new discussion, sort of a new discussion. It's related, but Boimine is supposed to be Rav Hillel Meiraba. It's Hillel Meiraba. It's the Bach adjusted. Boimine Rav Hillel Meiraba. Rav Hillel asks Rabba the following question. It's not Hillel and Shamli, this is an Amira. Is it the Hillel that made the calendar? I don't know when he was around. Do you have a comment on Rav Hillel? Yesh Mukta. Oh, really? He's on the track? It would look at Rabbah, because Rabbah would have a big. Would be on this one? Rabbah. No. Well, maybe. Rav Hillel is over here. Yeah. At the end of the town, it's almost the end of the Chasimas Talmud Rabbi. It's in the days of Rabbah, and matches on. Well, Chasimas Talmud Yishalmi, rather. At the end of Rav Hillel would be, at least according to that. Does that say Rabbi Hillel or Rav Hillel? Oh, right. Okay. Yesh muktzah l'chati Shabbos, ein muktzah l'chati Shabbos. We know usually muktzah is something that's not eligible for use when Yom Tov or Shabbos comes in. Bein hashmashos. We say, since when Yom Tov or Shabbos came in, it can't be used, it can't be moved or something, so then you can't use it the whole Shabbos. He asks the question. Let's say it's muktzah only for Chati Shabbos. So the Gemara has to analyze what's the case. Heichidami, ide echsi bein hashmashos. Which Chatzi? Which half? If when Shabbos came in, it was fit, echsi, that's good. That's all you need. It's good. It's not muktzah. Ide la yachsi. If when Shabbos came in, it wasn't fit, la yachsi. What is this? The Bein Hashmashos does everything. So what is this chatz? Leitricha, the Gemara explains, the echsei v'hadar idchei, v'hadar echsei. What's the din? The case that's given, mentioned later, what would be something that's muktzah? When you put out grapes to dehydrate and turn into raisins, you would lay them out in the sun. Or if you put out figs, the dehydrated turn into grapes, the dried figs. So you put them on the rooftop. Yeah. So when you put them out, you're pushing them away from being used. You can't use them until they're dry. In the middle, they're like spoiled, sort of. And then once they're dry, then they become back edible. So when you put it out, bein hashmashos, they're not accepted. They're not good because they're in between. And then on Shabbos, then they're so it had a mum, right? But the problem with the mum is that it's mumayvah. It would be a temporary. So here, what happened? When Yom Tov came in, or Shabbos comes in, it was eligible. Then, let's say what happened was it rained. Let's say they were fit to be eaten. They're raisins before Shabbos comes in. They're good. Problem is, you didn't take them off the roof, and then it rained, so they swelled again. So now you have to wait for them to go up. So, question is, when it becomes not eligible, does that ruin it? Let's take a look in the Gemara again. What happened was the echsei, that means that bein hashmashos it was acceptable, v'hadar idchei, and then it gets unacceptable. it gets rejected, like pushed aside. And then it becomes eligible again. What's it then? Saying the idche was because it rained, possibly. Amalei yesh muksa says it's muksa. This is Rabba responding to Rav Hillel. Esvei, so he has a question. They accept, everyone agrees that if a Bechor is born and it's born together with the mum, that it's considered acceptable. Now, let's take a look. Va'amai. Nema hai Bechor mikara habichazi agavime. The Bechor was eligible. Why? Because I could have shechted the mother. When you shech the mother, and you have the Bechor inside, even if it's a ben pakua, even if it's alive, but it's not a Bechor. Right? So it's eligible. Because you can shech the mother, and you can eat it, and you can eat even the fetus inside. There's no problem. It's only a Bechor after it's born. It was never born. It's not a Bechor. It's Yalidlei. Now it gives birth. When Yom Tov comes in, it's eligible. It gives birth on Yom Tov. So idchilei. Now it gets rejected. Echzei l'chacham, but you show it missing a leg. You show it to the chacham. Ishtirlei, it becomes permissible. You see that we say that there is no muktzah l'chatzi Shabbos. Rabbah said yesh muktzah l'chatzi Shabbos. Turns out that there was a moment here before it was shown to the chacham where it was idche, and nevertheless we say it's acceptable. Amar Abaya v'temer Rav Safra again the Yasvi Dayanei Hasam. The Dayanim were sitting right when it was being born, and they paskened even before it was finished to come out that it was acceptable. So we're talking about here where it was never idche. Now, it's not a treifa. We're saying that it has a mum, and therefore it could be shachted. Any mum is positive, right? Yeah, Daniel, it's good.
I was going to say, isn't the judge saying that from the very beginning he never had a mum to begin with?
Yeah, but you still need the pronouncement. That's what we're saying. You need the pronouncement. But he was there right away. So there was never a nidche. There was never a time that it was rejected. Yeah. Loyhok Tziklal. Ikad Amri, there are those that say, Amarle ein muktzah l'chatzi Shabbos. Rabbah responded differently. Not that there is muktzah, he responded that there's no muktzah. Lema Messiah. Oh, we have a proof for that. We have the case where it's born together with the mum, and we say that it's acceptable. The Bechor was originally eligible because of the mother. Could have shechted the mother. When it's born, it's rejected. It becomes muktzah in middle of Shabbos or Yom Tov, rather. And then it comes back to being acceptable. You see, that's a raya that there's ein muktzah l'chatzi Shabbos. Amar Abaye v'temer Rav Safra in the Yasvi Dayanei Hasam. There's no raya because it was never rejected because the Dayanim were sitting there. So we have two versions to the story, to whatever the psak is. But either way, there's no raya or there's no question from the Noilat Hu Mumayimai Noilat Bechor. Okay, Tashema, come and listen. Let's say he's eating grapes, and he has some that are extra. He doesn't finish the whole bag. What does he do? He takes them up to the roof. Let them dry, and then they'll be. That's what you do when you have a lot. They shouldn't go bad. You dehydrate. He has figs. How many can he eat? Puts them up to the roof to dry. Gregors are dried figs, and simukim are dried grapes. Now, you can't eat from them until you designate them by day until they're fit to be eaten. Because right now they're in the middle of the process. Yasmin is hasmana, is to like invite. It means to oh. Uh-huh. The Gemara is going to discuss that sort of. It means designate. It means designate that they're eligible. Yeah, they're good. What are farsikin? Is that peaches? Yeah. And chavushin are quince. But bashar kalmini pears, same with all types of fruits. What's quince? The quince, it looks like an apple, but it has to be big. At least that's my childish explanation of a quince. So, okay. Yeah, but it's, but it's right. But it's a quince. Okay, hey Chidami, what's going on over here? So the Gemara is going to sort of ask what you're mentioning. Either chazu, if it's fit before Yom Tov, in other words, bein hashmashas, it's already dried. Lamali asmana, and why do you have to designate it? It's dried or not? Either like chazu, and if it's not designated, I'm sorry, either like chazu, if it's not dried yet, kiasman l'may havi. So then what does it help to designate food that's not eligible, right? Maybe he doesn't know. So what does he do? He says, and it's hard for me to go up and look at them. If they're fit, so then they should be acceptable. Then I'm going to eat them. Amar Rav Kana, muktzah sheyavash veina baila makirin by mutter. If tomorrow he goes up and he looks at them and he says, yes, these were dried already yesterday, you can tell when they dried, so then it's mutter even without hasmana, without designation. So what is this designation that was going on here? Elalav, it must be the chazu v'idchul, that they were already dried. The problem is that it's rained. And then they become fit again because they re-dried. If you say that there's no problem, so why does he have to designate? What would the hasmana be? The hasmana would be that he says, when Yom Tov came in, it wasn't wet. They were dried and they were ready to be eaten. The problem is it rained. So what he says is that even if it rains, I'm still going to eat them after they re-dry. So if there's no such thing as muktzah l'chatzi Shabbos, then why did he have to pronounce that? Elamai, it must be yesh muktzah. It must be that there is such a thing as muktzah, and his pronouncement is going to help. So the Gemara says, 1 second. If there is muktzah, kiyasman l'may have it. You can't designate something before it becomes ineligible, that after it becomes ineligible, it's going to come back to being designated. Before it's muktzah, you can't do any. You can't. Right now, it's not muktzah because right now you could eat it. Something's going to happen to it. So that's not going to help to say before anything happens to it that after what happens, it's going to go back and I'm still going to eat it. The Gemara says, it must be that it's partially acceptable, edible. Just let's finish. Some people will eat it at this stage, some people won't. So Azmin Gali Daite, if he says I'm going to eat it, that means that he's telling us that he's one of those guys. Lo Yasmin, if he doesn't designate it, then Lo Gali Daite. Okay. So this doesn't prove to me. We thought the only way of explaining this case was that it's Muktzah L'Chatzi Shabbos, and then we're saying that that's why he needs Hazmana. We said, no, we have other ways of explaining it, that it was really this intermediate stage where Hazmana helps. Got it? Tashim Amar Reb Zera Tashima. Reb Zera says, come and listen, I'll prove it to you that there's no Muktzah L'Chatzi Shabbos. We pull in Va'adashim from beans. We cook beans on Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook. The pull in Va'adashim Mikar Chazal L'Kaisis. Originally, they can only be eaten by chewing them. Kais means to chew. Lakais means to chew it, which means that it's not really like a good eating. You can eat the beans raw, but that's not the main eating. So so it has some sort of being edible. However, Shadinu b'kdeira, you throw it into the pot, it's not crunchy anymore. You boil up the pot. It becomes too hot to eat. You have to wait till it cools down, right? Because it's boiling. Gomar bishalayu, it's finished cooking. Then chazilu, then it becomes fit. See what just happened here? Yom Tov came in, it was eligible. You put it in the pot, it becomes non-eligible. And then after it cools, you put it in the plate, it's eligible again. See, there's no such thing as muktzah l'chatzi Shabbos, l'chatzi Yom Tov. Because when you put it into the pot, it became not eligible, and now you're allowed to eat it. Basically, every time you cook would be like this. So Amalei Abaya says, according to you, Tikshilach Kader's Dalma. Then you always have a problem. You have an inherent problem. The Stam Kader's Dalma bein Hashmashas Reitzchasein. Every single pot. What happens when Shabbos comes in? They're boiling. You always heat the fire hot before Shabbos, so it should stay hot for as long as, even if you're doing hatmana, whatever the case is, you boil it right before Shabbos. It should be as hot as possible, and then you eat it later that evening. So what happened here? Bein hashmashas, it was too hot to eat. So bein hashmashas is the main time. If you say that a boiling pot is muktzah, because you can't eat it then, so then every single pot, every Shabbos, all your food is muktzah. That was it. We were 6:30. Sorry about that. Ella gamru b'dei adam lekami ba'ilan. Where it says that you can't call muktzah something that is in your hands to be able to accomplish. Lekami ba'ilan gamru b'dei shemayim. Certain things you could do. You put the pot on the fire, you take the pot off the fire. That is in your hands. That's not a din of muktzah. Every time there's raw food that you can put into the pot and cook it and make it edible, it wasn't muktzah, it was you have full control over that cooking. But what is muktzah? Muktzah is something that's up to heaven. I'm going to put it out in the sun. How long is it going to take to dry? I don't know. I'm going to have to see what happens today, So the beans is up to you. You put it in the pot, you take it out of the pot. That's bidei adam. That's not muktzah. Right. Yeah. Okay. It's the only thing that you lose control of. Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya Havaleyahu Bukhra. Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, this is the grandson of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. He has a Bukhar. Okay, and he also had Kayanim that would eat by him. So it would be great if this Bukhar would be eligible because it has a mum, he can serve it to the Kayanim that are sitting around the table. He's not a Kayan. He comes from the line of David. However, I learned recently that he was that they come from David through a daughter. It wasn't I read that. I saw when they brought over here the whole set of Steinsaltz's writings. So one of them is Talmudic images. I'm reading about Hillel. says over there, it's clear that it wasn't from the sun. That could be. Oh no, that was biblical images, I think. But they have biblical images also. So yeah, controversy. Yeah. Makes the prices go up. Oh, really? Yeah, they joked. They said, if you want to sell your book, you either get a skama or you get a chayram. Okay. So Rabbi Yehuda Nisiavalehu Bukhra, he has a Bukhar. So Shadri Lakami de Rabami. He sends it to Rabami. Rabami is the Chacham. Sabar de Leila Messi. Rabami doesn't want to look at it. It's Yom Tov. Amalei Rab Zrika, B'Tamer Rab Yirmiyah. Either Rab Zrika or Rab Yirmiyah says to Rabami, 1 second, we have a Mishnah. It's a machlekes in the Mishnah between Rab Yehuda and Rab Shimon. We have a Gemara in Eruvin that says Rab Yehuda and Rab Shimon halacha Rab Yehuda. The halacha is like Rab Yehuda. Rab Yehuda says you're allowed to look at it. It was Rab Shimon that said Eina min ha-mukhan. Yeah, we would have to say that there was some sort of moment before Yom Tov, otherwise it would have been muktzah according to Rabbi Yehuda. But whatever the case is, Reb Shimon was the one that made the big deal about, if you look at it, you're masakin. Okay, but he still doesn't look at it. He's going rabbi shopping. So he goes to the next rabbi. He also doesn't want to look at it. Reb Yirmiyah, or Reb Zrika, now it's Reb Yirmiyah first. Some say it was Reb Zrika. He says, Reb Yehuda, Reb Shimon, Reb Yehuda, you should be allowed to look at it. Okay. Amalei Rababa. So Rababa says to Reb Yirmiyah, to Reb Zrika, says, my time Elishaf Kasinu L'Rabbanan L'Mevarot Reb Shimon. Why aren't you letting them pass like Reb Shimon? Let them pass like Reb Shimon, that it's usher to look at. Amalei Vatma Biyatza. He says, do you know anything about this? Why? But why are you telling me that the halacha should be like Rabbi Yehuda? Amalei hachi amar Reb Zera halacha Reb Shimon. I have a statement from Reb Zera that the halacha is like Reb Shimon, that you're not allowed to look at a bukhar on Yom Tov. Amar says, Amar Mandahu. Someone said, Ezkei be'isak lahasam. I should only merit, and I'm going to go up to Eretz Yisrael. Agmel shmait mikumi demara, and I'm going to hear the teaching from the master himself. He comes to Eretz Yisrael. He meets Reb Zera. Amalei, he says, Amar Mar, halacha Reb Shimon. Did you say that the halacha is like Reb Shimon? Amalei lai. I didn't say that. I said, no, Mr. Amri. I said, it's probably, it's mistaber, it's logical that it should be like Reb Shimon. Midiktani b'masnisen, because the Mishnah says, Reb Shimon aimer kol shemu menikim v'aydim yitzim min ha-mocha. Okay, Reb Shimon has a statement. That you're not supposed to look at a bukhar on Yom Tov. It's not prepared. Uktani la bebraisa, and we also had a braisa that's Rabbi Shibra, and that braisa says, "Chachamim uktani la bebraisa b'lashon chachamim. Chachamim aimreizim in a the same statement of Reb Shimon in the braisa said in the name of the chachamim. Shema mina mistaber kavasei. It must be that when the braisa says chachamim aimrim, it's telling me that that's the accepted opinion, and so probably the halacha is like them. I guess we should stop over here. We'll stop by my Haviyallah. So over Yom Tov, we'll learn over here. 1, 2. It would be great if we could finish the parak. That's where we're supposed to be. But for sure, I'd like to get to Daf Chavtes on the. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you about Daf Chavtes itself. This is. Oh, 1 second. No, we should be able to. Let's try to finish the parak. This was a hard Daf. I don't think so. I don't know yet. 8:45. Yeah. Okay.
Good Yom Tov, Rabbi. Thank you.
Okay.
What did you say about meeting on Yom Tov?
8:45 up here in the library.
AM or PM?
AM. AM.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.